Why didn't you invite me to the ceremony? Invite you? Because it would be embarrassing. What? It would have been shameful to invite a poor person, that's why. The eldest son, David, spat out those words. However, at his brother's wedding, he shouted, "Hey, give me some money! This is a scam. What happened to him afterward?" I'm Linda, turning 52 this year. I have 2 sons. Right after my youngest, Kevin, was born, my husband died in an accident. As a single mother, I raised Kevin and my eldest son, David, on my own. Of course, we couldn't afford a luxurious life. I worked every chance I could to pay for living expenses and their education. Because of this, I think my children often felt lonely. David, who always hated our bare-bones life, often rebelled against me. After graduating high school, he left home and never looked back. On the other hand, Kevin has been a mama's boy since he was little, always hugging me and saying, "Mom, thanks for working so hard." When I came home from work, that always made me so happy. Of course, as he got older, the hugging stopped, but he always seemed to worry about me. I rarely hear from David now, but Kevin and I keep in touch regularly, and he frequently visits home. I'm often surprised at how different my 2 sons have turned out to be. One day I got a call from Kevin asking, "Hey, I've got someone I want to marry. Can I bring her over next time I'm off?" I was overjoyed and told him I couldn't wait to meet her. To think that my little Kevin wants to bring home the woman he wants to marry. On his day off, Kevin brought over his fiancée, Julia. "Nice to meet you, I'm Julia. I've heard so much about you from Kevin, and I've been looking forward to meeting you," Julia said, showing me her lovely smile. Just like someone Kevin would bring, she had a very friendly and approachable vibe, and I liked her the moment I saw her. Actually, we've already booked a venue for the wedding in 6 months, but we haven't decided on the type of ceremony yet. Is that so? It's a once-in-a-lifetime event for you, Julia, so we have to make it special. The 3 of us had a great time discussing the upcoming wedding. I felt so happy at the thought of my child getting married that I found myself getting teary-eyed as we talked. A few days later, still giddy about Kevin's wedding, I told one of the neighbors that my youngest is getting married. The neighbor said, "Really? Congratulations. After David, now Kevin. Good things keep happening." She then dropped a bombshell. "You know, David got married a little while back and now Kevin's following suit." David got married? As I stood there confused about what was happening, someone remarked, "You know, my eldest was invited to David's wedding and attended." You didn't know, Linda? I hadn't heard anything about David getting married. Shocked by the news, I rushed home and called David. It had been a while since we last spoke. We hadn't been in touch recently, so I anxiously waited for David to pick up the phone. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Hello? David? You got married? What do you mean? You had a wedding without telling me?" When I asked, David replied with a hint of annoyance. "So what? You got married without even telling me. Why didn't you invite me to your ceremony?" "Because it's embarrassing." "What?" "Because you're poor, Mom." "You don't get it? I didn't invite you because you're poor." I was stunned and couldn't understand what he meant at first. Embarrassed because we're poor? I was so confused I couldn't find the words to respond. Then a woman's voice came on the line. "Hello? This is Kate, David's wife." "David's? You're quite slow, aren't you, Linda? You don't understand what David is trying to say?" "I happen to be a CEO's daughter, you know? My dad runs his own company. That means David is now the crucial heir to my father's company. Next month, the company's management rights will be his. Haven't you heard of Scat Corporation? Well, I guess someone living a bottom-of-the-barrel life like you wouldn't know. It's fine if you don't." Kate's words left me speechless. Poor and at the bottom. Could someone really say that to their mother-in-law? That's why David doesn't want anything to do with a poor person like you anymore. It's embarrassing, isn't it? From now on, could you please stop contacting us? You understand, right? Or is this too grand a scale for a poor person to grasp? Kate said some truly awful things to me, belittling me with such harsh words. As I stood frozen, phone in hand, I could hear Kate's laughter through the receiver. Then David's voice came through saying, "That's just how it is, so stop contacting us. Having someone like you, who's as poor as my mom, around is just embarrassing for me. It's a disgrace, right? With this, I'm cutting off our family ties. You're a stranger now. Goodbye. And with that, the call ended. I was stunned and couldn't move for a while after such cruel words from David and Kate. I was shocked to learn that David had been avoiding me. I couldn't understand why he would say something so cruel, especially since we were family. The next day, Kevin and Julia came over to discuss the wedding plans. I debated whether to tell them about David and Kate's hurtful words, but the shock was too much for me to bear alone. Upon hearing the story, Kevin became furious. I couldn't believe my own brother could be capable of such cruelty. Julia was equally angry, questioning how anyone could say such things to their own mother. I thanked them both for their support, apologizing for bringing up such an unpleasant topic, but Kevin reassured me that there was no need for me to apologize. He couldn't fathom how someone, no matter how wealthy or powerful, could treat their mother-in-law with such disrespect. It seemed that being the daughter of a CEO had given Kate a sense of pride, but I couldn't help but wonder if Scat Corporation was truly as successful as they claimed. That's when Kevin had a realization. He asked me to hold on and then proceeded to look something up on his smartphone. As I waited, he confirmed his suspicions. He then asked if we could invite Kevin to the wedding ceremony. I was hesitant, still struggling with my emotions, but Kevin assured me that he could handle it. I couldn't bear the thought of being made a fool of again, and Julia agreed to have Kevin there as well. Touched by their concern, I couldn't help but tear up and thank them both. In 6 months, Kevin would get a taste of his own medicine. From that day on, the three of us worked together to prepare for the wedding ceremony. I knew there was only one thing I could do to show my gratitude towards Kevin and Julia, so I insisted they accept a small token of my appreciation. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. Thanks to Kevin and Julia's extensive network, many people came to attend the ceremony. As I arrived at the venue, I immediately spotted a familiar face: David. Next to him was Kate, with her flashy presence. They looked awkward and uncomfortable when they saw me, expecting me to be mocked once again. But I braced myself and asked if something was wrong. Kate hesitated before saying that everything was fine. "What's with that outfit? It looks like a rag." Embarrassing. She scanned me from head to toe with those words. "Don't talk to me so familiarly. I've told you, we're strangers now." David snapped at me abruptly. His harsh words were the worst, but I simply responded, "Oh, is that so? Well, that's that then." And I nodded and walked away. They were left staring after me, probably shocked by my nonchalant response, thinking I would be more upset. But it wasn't going to be that easy. The regret for their words towards me was yet to come. The wedding was a grand affair. The coordination and staff were perfect, the wedding cake was marvelous, and the food was so good it left nothing to be desired. My seat at the wedding was relatively close to David and Kate. I overheard them talking while they were eating. "Hey, isn't this food and cake expensive? Is your brother rich? He's just a regular office worker, right? Maybe his wife is the one with money." Indeed, a wedding of this quality would have required substantial funds. It would have been impossible for Kevin, a company employee, and Julia, a kindergarten teacher, to afford on their own. As the wedding drew to a close, it was time for Kevin to express his gratitude to me. Kevin looked my way and said, "I can never thank my mom enough for the cherished upbringing she gave me. I'm more grateful to her than anyone else. It's thanks to her hard work that I've managed to grow up to be who I am today." David and Kate, who had been listening to Kevin's words with boredom, were taken by surprise when they heard. The reason today's ceremony is so fabulous and luxurious is because Mom contributed financially to make it happen. At that revelation, David and Kate looked like they were about to leap out of their chairs. They exchanged glances, then turned back to look at me. Instead of using it for herself, Mom had been saving money without indulging in any luxuries, thinking of her sons. She generously offered to help with today's wedding. So, this wonderful ceremony wasn't just thanks to us, it was possible because Mom was here with us. Indeed, I had a secret. My late husband's father, my father-in-law, had left me a $2 million inheritance. Though he lived in the countryside, he was a farmer with 2 large tracts of land. He had left that land to me before he passed away, thinking it would be of some use. I lived modestly, not touching the inheritance, saving it for when my sons would truly be independent, for their weddings. However, David and Kate had arrogantly married without informing me, cutting me out of their lives. If they had just kept me informed, even that inheritance would have been put to good use. The inheritance would have been shared with David. In the middle of the ceremony, David and Kate raised their voices in front of all the attendees and yelled, "Hey! Why aren't you giving us the inheritance? We want our cut. This is a scam." That's right, that money should be passed on to us, shouldn't it? You're not pocketing it, are you? Everyone's attention was drawn to the two of them as they shouted at me. This was to be expected. I said coldly to them, "This has nothing to do with you. Didn't I just say we're strangers? Why should I have to give an inheritance to a stranger?" David in a panic blurted out, "But that's not right. Pet, we didn't know you had that kind of money. I'll acknowledge you as our mother." Still speaking condescendingly to me even in this situation. Suddenly, Kate switched to a smiling face and said, "We're family, aren't we? It's not too late. I'll let you get back with David." So about the inheritance. I almost laughed at the predictability of their responses. The crowd at the venue, initially abuzz, looked on with dismay once they understood what was happening. Then Kevin, through the microphone, addressed David and Kate. "You're the ones who said you wanted to cut ties with Mom, right? We want nothing to do with people who are only after money. Stay out of our lives and get out of here now." Unsatisfied, the two ended up making a scene, throwing things at me from the table. When Kevin asked the venue staff to escort them out, security dragged them out of the venue. Kevin then addressed everyone again. "Sorry for the disturbance. We will continue to cherish our mother. Whether there's money or not, she's still our precious mother." And the crowd responded with warm applause. And with that, the bond between us and David and his wife was officially severed. Why were David and Kate so fixated on the inheritance? The company run by Kate's parents had gone bankrupt last month. Kevin had known beforehand that Kate's parents' company was in trouble. He's aiming to be a trader. As part of his daily routine, he executes buy and sell orders for stocks and bonds for investors and monitors the stock prices of many companies. 6 months ago, Kate mentioned Scat Corporation to me. It turned out the company had been starting to falter. It seems likely that neither David nor Kate knew about it as they were bragging over the phone, but Kevin knew that the company would probably go bankrupt. Kate's parents probably rushed to approve of her marriage to David and dumped the company on them to avoid being burdened with debt themselves. And then the company went bankrupt shortly after. Who knew nothing were suddenly saddled overwhelming debt and had no place to live. Kevin knew this but chose not to tell David, unable to forgive David's terrible insults towards me. As a result, David and Kate are now renting an old apartment, with Kate working as a cashier at a supermarket, and David doing construction work while looking for a new job. They must be feeling the hardship of working for a living. They would have been desperate for my inheritance, but life isn't that sweet. They should realize how harsh it is to declare someone a stranger, even your own mother. Afterward, David called my cell phone many times. Of course, I had no intention of helping David, and it was he who declared us strangers. Kevin also said he had no intention of helping David, and we blocked all contact from him. And now we are actually building a small, new single-story house on a small piece of land a bit out of town. There was a chance that David might come to our old house, so we used the money saved for David for the new house instead. We are looking forward to the house being completed. 4 months after Kevin and Julia's wedding, we found out that Julia was pregnant. The thought of having our first grandchild is incredibly exciting. I hope to continue living a peaceful life, fitting for me. I just wish to cherish Kevin and Julia, who have always protected me, and live happily ever after. My name is Keith. I live in New York with my wife Karen. We used to work at the same company. Though we were in different departments, we were on the same floor and initially only exchanged greetings. I found her incredibly attractive and eventually started sitting with her in the company's break area during lunch. From there, we began talking more. During one of our conversations, I suggested, "How about we go out for drinks sometime?" Her response was, "Sure, but I'm bringing a cute coworker with me." so recommend a nice place, please. I remember feeling over the moon when she accepted my invitation, since I had always thought she must be popular. The following weekend, we went out for drinks in a group of 3 men and 3 women, bringing along our co-workers and juniors. Karen looked stunning in her casual attire, and she completely captured my attention. Of course, I had already told the co-worker I brought that I was interested in Karen, so the atmosphere was quite lively, and we had a great time. When the mood shifted towards going to a second location, I pretended to be drunk and slipped away from the group, ending up at a hotel with Karen. Our relationship started in an unconventional way, but we eventually became a couple and decided to marry a few years later. At that time, some female colleagues seemed concerned, but I was too filled with joy at the prospect of having a beautiful wife to care much about their worries. Looking back, I wish I had paid more attention to what those women were saying. Married life, which I had anticipated to be full of happiness, wasn't always smooth sailing. My work suddenly became very demanding. I was staying late every day, and I even had to work on weekends. It was a challenging start to our married life, which we had hoped to enjoy fully. I was concerned that the lack of shared meals was making Karen feel lonely. I'm sorry for being so busy lately that we haven't been able to have meals together. I apologized. It's okay, she reassured me. It gives me time to focus on things at home. I had been having lunch with a friend I met through my part-time job, and it had been quite fulfilling. That's good to hear, I replied. But don't overwork yourself, Keith. I felt relieved to see Karen managing well at home and finding her own ways to enjoy life even when I couldn't give her much attention. About a year into our marriage, my job finally started to settle down, and we began to enjoy our weekends together. I made the most of this time by going out with Karen and trying to make up for the moments we missed during our first year of marriage. One day, Karen mentioned, "I think it's about time we start trying for a baby." The timing felt right, since my work had just come to a good stopping point, and it had been exactly a year since our wedding. I was delighted that we were on the same page. Eventually, we discovered that Karen was pregnant with a little life growing inside her. I asked her to quit her part-time job to prioritize her health. The prospect of becoming a father made me even more dedicated to my work. My colleagues and bosses celebrated with us, and I was driven by the mission to earn more to support my wife and child. Both sets of parents were thrilled about the arrival of their first grandchild, and even before the baby was born, they were discussing who would buy the crib, the stroller, and other essentials. The family interactions also increased, bringing everyone closer together. Several months later, we were blessed with the arrival of a healthy baby boy. When I touched his tiny hands and feet for the first time, I was moved to tears. It's curious how he's so adorable that I never tire of watching him. Just the thought that I'll be able to watch him grow for decades to come made me feel like my life had meaning. The boy was the spitting image of Karen, and everyone said he'd be a heartbreaker when he grew up. Right on the money. I couldn't see much of myself in him, but I figured there'd be plenty of father-son chats I'd be responsible for down the line, and that was fine by me. 3 years later, on one of my days off, Karen mentioned she was going out for lunch with some mom friends, so I stayed home with our now 3-year-old son. We were watching TV when suddenly he fell ill. He was suffering from vomiting and diarrhea, looking so miserable, but I rushed him to the local clinic. I texted Karen just to say we were at the clinic, but not to worry. The doctor thought it was just a cold, but decided to do a blood test just to be safe. The test confirmed it was indeed just a cold. But while looking at the test results, I realized how grateful I was for my family and the love we shared. The doctor handed me the test results. I stumbled upon a shocking truth. The blood type listed was B. I muttered it to myself, or so I thought, but it came out loud enough for the doctor to give me a puzzled look. I thanked him quickly and left the examination room. I'm type A and Karen is type O. The possibility of us having a type B child baffled me. At that moment, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion. I told myself it must be some mistake, over and over, but I couldn't dismiss a growing suspicion. When we got home, Karen had already returned and asked how everything went, but I'm not sure if I responded properly. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't come to a satisfactory conclusion. And without anyone to turn to, I decided to get a DNA test. The wait for the results was excruciating. And though I went through the motions of responding to Karen and my son, my mind felt foggy. The results were clear. He wasn't my son. It felt like everything I had built up was crumbling down all at once. I'd never experienced such a feeling before, not when I flunked an exam or got dumped by a girlfriend. After the results, I found myself unable to see the boy as my son, and I even began to wonder why this child was living in my house. You might think that after raising a child for 3 years, even if not by blood, affection would develop, but it didn't for me. My rejection might have been towards Karen's lack of ethics in making me believe the child was mine. I could have pretended not to notice, and maybe time would have healed our family back to happiness. But I started to lose my appetite, and even when I forced food down, it wouldn't stay. At my wit's end, the only solution I could think of was divorce, so I sought advice from a coworker who had been through it. I invited my senior colleague out for drinks after work the next day and laid it all out. Karen and I were known for our good relationship, and since we were a workplace romance, she was still connected with my colleagues. At first, my senior thought it was a joke, but as he listened, he grew serious and introduced me to the lawyer who had helped him during his divorce. But as I laid it all out for him, I could see him getting more and more serious, and eventually, he put me in touch with a lawyer who had helped him out during his own divorce. A few days later, I made a beeline for that lawyer's office, appointment in hand. When I showed him the DNA results in his office, even he seemed taken aback by my preparedness. "Understood," he said. "Are you sure you want a divorce?" I nodded without hesitation. We worked out the terms, and all that was left was to discuss them with Karen. The lawyer advised having a third party present during the talk to prevent disputes later on, so he agreed to sit in. To keep a record, I also decided to record the conversation. That weekend, I told Karen we were going out, left the child with her parents, and under the pretense of a date, took her to the lawyer's office. She initially laughed it off, asking, "Why are we at a lawyer's office?" But as she picked up on the grave atmosphere, her smile faded. Fearing my emotions would get the better of me, we agreed the lawyer would do all the talking. Karen was shown the DNA test results by the lawyer, and when she heard the demand that I wanted a divorce, custody of our children, and a refund of alimony and child support, she began to shake uncontrollably, and her face went pale. She seemed to be choking, her mouth opening and closing, but she couldn't speak. "Ma'am, please calm down. We understand everything. Will you talk to us?" When the lawyer said this, Karen took a deep breath and, trying to compose herself, began to speak. The father of the child was the manager of the store where Karen worked part-time. When my job kept me busy and we were living like ships passing in the night, he approached her. Feeling lonely, Karen accepted an invitation to dinner, thinking it was harmless. But that very day they crossed a line. Their affair didn't end with just one encounter. She lied to me about going to lunch with friends and met with him several times. She had been on birth control at first, but one day she forgot to take it. And just by chance, she met up with the manager that day and became pregnant. Fearing that I would find out, she told me she wanted a child. When I heard this, I felt sick to my stomach. Karen herself didn't know whose child it was until it was born. But after the birth, she immediately realized, based on the blood type, that it was the manager's. As the child grew, Karen thought they looked like the manager, but she assumed that if she kept quiet, it wouldn't be discovered. After hearing Karen's story, the lawyer asked, "Do you still have contact information for this person?" "Yes, then call him right now, please." Karen was visibly shocked and unsure of what to do. "You have to inform him that he has a child," the lawyer insisted. Realizing resistance was futile, Karen did as instructed and made the call, arranging to meet the manager near the lawyer's office. On the day of the meeting, I saw Karen and the manager in front of the bus turnaround that resembled a station. The lawyer and I approached them and asked them to come to the office. The manager, unable to grasp the situation and laughing nervously, followed us. When he listened to the recording of Karen's story at the office, he gradually turned pale. When the lawyer conveyed my demands to Karen, the previously passive manager exploded, showering Karen with abuse. "Please, let's remain calm and talk this through," the lawyer interjected. The manager, struggling to contain his panic, began to speak. Apparently, he had overheard Karen expressing feelings of loneliness to another part-time staff member at the store, and with ulterior motives, he invited her for drinks and took her home. Despite knowing she was married, he went ahead with his actions. Hearing this, the lawyer stated firmly, "In that case, you will also pay alimony and child support to the husband. Remember, we have this recorded, so if it goes to court, we'll have the upper hand." The manager, in a panic, denied any responsibility, but the lawyer continued. "Are you married? That ring on your left hand is quite telling. Can you please call your wife here?" Even the brazen manager screamed that it was impossible, but finally agreed after being persuaded that the truth would come out in a lawsuit anyway, and his wife was called in. When the manager's wife heard the story from the lawyer, she was furious. She threw her wedding ring at the manager and screamed, "We're getting a divorce!" The lawyer and I managed to calm her down, and she burst into tears, saying she really wanted a divorce and told the lawyer to make her husband pay whatever alimony was needed. In the end, Karen, having no income, was only required to pay a minimal amount of alimony, while the manager was left to pay the rest of the alimony and child support in a settlement. After that, I was mentally exhausted from all the ordeal and had to take a leave of absence from work. The divorce was finalized, and I decided to take some time off at my parents' home, so I moved out of the house we lived in. I've been working hard, driven by the motivation to support my family, but now I find no fulfillment in my job anymore. Still, the colleagues and bosses I consulted about the divorce have been encouraging, telling me we should go out for a drink once I've settled down. I've cried and apologized to my parents back home for all that's happened. I've worried them so much that I'm thinking, once my mental state is stable, I might take them on an overseas vacation. Sometimes I feel like I hear a voice calling out Daddy from somewhere. I can't make heads or tails of what this is. They say it's not the child's fault, but is it wrong that I just can't see that child as my son? To be honest, I feel like I'll never be able to sort this out for the rest of my life.